No More Room in Hell's zombie apocalypse is driven by the 732ZH virus, also called encephalitis lethargica, based on a real extinct virus that affected the world from 1917 to 1928, creating a pandemic that overwhelms humanity with classic Romero-style undead that require complete brain destruction to be permanently killed. Another time when the government tried to downplay the severity and spread, while no research team or agency was able to figure out how to suppress the virus. Heavily inspired by George A. Romero's Living Dead series, with the title referencing Dawn of the Dead's iconic line, "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." The game forces players into brutal survival scenarios where infection spreads through bites, scratches, or contaminated water, and victims must take Phalanx pills to delay inevitable death and reanimation. What sets No More Room in Hell apart from other zombie games is its unflinching commitment to realism, including the controversial decision to feature zombie children that behave like fast-moving runners. Since release, complaints about child zombies prompted an official 2013 developer statement declaring, "We will not be removing them. They are a core component of our game design and our design philosophy," with developers explaining that their goal was to create a zombie game not based on killing and action, but on tension and fear. So basically, go cry about it. The virus uniquely reanimates the entire brain rather than specific parts, making these zombies retain disturbing human-like qualities while being driven purely by hunger, creating encounters that feel genuinely tragic rather than simply action-packed. No More Room in Hell proves that sometimes the most effective horror comes from refusing to sanitize the apocalypse, forcing players to confront uncomfortable truths about the government's failure to take action and how they all failed the world. Happiness transforms the zombie apocalypse into claustrophobic social commentary by trapping residents in a luxury apartment building when the failed pneumonia treatment drug called Next causes a worldwide pandemic known as the Lyta virus, aka mad person disease. Those infected by Lyta experience short bouts of insanity and bloodlust before completely regressing into a zombie-like state, with the virus spreading through bites or saliva while causing madness, loss of morale, and an insatiable thirst for blood. This was an interesting take on the zombies you typically see, because they generally were in this state for a couple of hours a day and had no recollection of what they did, which is kind of insane. The genius lies in how the series uses the apartment building quarantine as a pressure cooker for human nature, forcing diverse residents to confront their prejudices and survival instincts while civil rights groups protest against military containment measures, believing the infected are still capable of normal human interaction. The series weaponizes pandemic anxiety by using the fear of the coronavirus pandemic as a backdrop to create a new virus, making every cough and scratch feel like a death sentence in a world where infection means losing your humanity. Each episode becomes a twisted social experiment where neighbors turn against each other faster than the virus can spread. Happiness proves that sometimes the real monsters aren't the infected, but the people who reveal their true nature when civilization's safety net disappears. Cooties delivers one of the most disturbing horror comedy premises ever. A chicken infected with a mutant virus gets processed into contaminated chicken nuggets at Fort Chicken Elementary School, turning innocent grade school kids into a feral swarm of massive savages that hunt their teachers for dinner. The outbreak begins when bully student Shelley Linker eats one of the tainted black dotted nuggets, green goo and all, then bites her tormentor Patriot during class, causing a foodborne virus that rots children's brains and transforms fewer than 90 elementary students into zombie-like cannibals. This 2014 nightmare weaponizes every parent's worst fear about school lunch programs while forcing a desperate group of teachers led by aspiring horror writer Clint Hadson, played by Elijah Wood, to survive against their own students in a twisted game of cat and mouse. Every classroom rule gets flipped when the very kids teachers are supposed to protect become their bloodthirsty hunters. The opening credits sequence showing the step-by-step nugget creation process will make you never look at processed chicken the same way, while the climatic gasoline fire scene where the infected children burn alive proves that sometimes the most effective horror comes from corrupting childhood innocence. Cooties transforms the everyday school cafeteria into ground zero for humanity's most unthinkable nightmare, where lunch literally becomes a matter of life and death. Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress absolutely demolishes the zombie playbook by throwing us into a steampunk fever dream where the Industrial Revolution meets apocalyptic chaos. This isn't your basic zombie outbreak. We're talking about Kabaneri, literal corpses with iron-plated hearts that can only be destroyed by piercing their metallic core, forcing humanity to bunker down in fortress train stations connected by badass armored steam locomotives. The virus spreads through bites and blood contact like wildfire, nearly catapulting humanity into extinction and forcing survivors to establish isolated, fortified cities where steam trains become literal lifelines between stations. Here's where it gets absolutely unhinged. Engineer Ikuma becomes infected while testing his prototype steam gun and transforms into a rare Kabaneri, a hybrid being who keeps his human consciousness while gaining superhuman abilities. This man literally said, "Fine, I'll evolve myself," and became humanity's desperate answer to their own extinction. The general population sees Kabaneri as cursed supernatural beings, but research reveals they're actually virus-infected hosts, making every train journey a high-stakes speed run through zombie-infested wastelands where steam-powered technology becomes humanity's only play against the undead apocalypse. Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare said "hold my beer" and transforms the Wild West into an absolute supernatural nightmare when Abraham Reyes makes the fatal mistake of stealing an ancient Aztec mask from sacred tombs, unleashing a zombie plague across the American frontier that ironically turns him into the undead himself. This highly infectious undead plague spreads across the frontier with devastating speed, forcing John Marston to desperately search for a cure while early signs in Blackwater warn to close the borders. Rockstar completely flipped their realistic Western formula on its head, combining cowboys with zombies while somehow maintaining the series' signature storytelling depth, moral complexity, and badass gunplay, creating a genre-bending masterpiece that shouldn't work but absolutely does. The plague can only be stopped when John ventures into the cursed tombs and returns the stolen Aztec mask to its original resting place, because some artifacts come with consequences that extend far beyond the grave. This DLC proves that even in the lawless frontier, there are some lines that shouldn't be crossed, and some ancient powers that should never be disturbed. The Blacklight Virus in Prototype represents evolution weaponized, transforming its host Alex Mercer into a shape-shifting predator capable of consuming and perfectly mimicking anyone he touches. Unlike traditional zombie infections, Blacklight doesn't create mindless undead, but rather grants horrific abilities, including superhuman strength, regeneration, and the power to absorb memories and identities from victims. The virus originated as a military bioweapon designed by Gentech Corporation, but when Alex Mercer was cornered by Blackwatch in Penn Station, he shattered the vial and released the virus onto the unsuspecting city as his final act of defiance. Here's the twisted reality. Alex Mercer actually died in that station, and what players control is the virus itself wearing his reanimated corpse like a perfectly crafted disguise. Blacklight's most terrifying aspect is its perfect mimicry, allowing infected beings to impersonate anyone they've consumed, making trust impossible in a city under quarantine. The infection spreads through direct contact rather than bites, creating runners, hunters, and other grotesque mutations that swarm through New York streets, while Alex literally becomes a walking biological weapon, capable of transforming his limbs into claws, blades, and hammer fists. Military forces deployed devastating firepower against the outbreak, turning Manhattan into a war zone where civilians become collateral damage in the fight against an unstoppable biological weapon that doesn't just want to spread, but evolve. School Live weaponizes the Mo anime format as psychological warfare, creating the most devastating bait and switch in zombie fiction by disguising a brutal apocalypse as a cute girls doing cute things series until viewers realize the quote-unquote school club activities are actually desperate survival tactics. The outbreak, speculated to be caused by a biological weapon possibly connected to the shady Randall Corporation, transforms Japan into a zombie wasteland where the infection spreads so rapidly that it consumes the majority of cities within the first day. The series absolutely destroys you by using Yuki Takiya's psychological break from reality as both a coping mechanism and narrative device. She literally cannot process that her beloved school has become a zombie-infested tomb where her friends fight for survival daily. The adorable art style and cheerful music become increasingly unhinged as viewers realize they're watching traumatized teenagers desperately clinging to normalcy while surrounded by the Walking Dead. And honestly, it hits harder than most gore-fested could. School Live proves that sometimes the most effective horror comes from subverting expectations, turning comfort into nightmare fuel where every smile hides unimaginable trauma. Contracted takes the zombie infection concept and makes it absolutely personal by transforming it into a sexually transmitted disease, following Samantha as she contracts a mysterious virus after being drugged and assaulted at a party. This film doesn't mess around with traditional zombie action. Instead, it delivers a deeply disturbing look at gradual physical and mental deterioration as Samantha's body begins rotting from the inside out over several days. Her symptoms start subtly with nausea and fatigue, but escalate to horrific bodily decay, including bleeding from orifices, tooth loss, and flesh literally falling away in chunks. The virus spreads through sexual contact, creating a horror narrative that doubles as commentary on sexual assault, disease stigma, and bodily autonomy. And honestly, it's more terrifying than any zombie horde. Samantha's desperate attempt to maintain normalcy while her body betrays her creates genuinely disturbing body horror that focuses on personal degradation rather than action sequences. The infection's patient zero is revealed to be a necrophiliac who contracted the disease from corpses, establishing a chain of transmission that makes every intimate encounter potentially fatal. By the film's end, Samantha has become a carrier who will inevitably spread the infection to others, creating a cycle of contamination driven by human connection itself. SAS Zombie Assault absolutely launches the zombie apocalypse into the far future of year 3104, where the Thurna N virus spreads across an entire Trans-Federation planet, causing inhabitants to mutate into walking corpses and undead monstrosities that create a planetary pandemic. Ninja Kiwi's sci-fi masterpiece transforms the zombie formula by setting humanity's fight for survival in space stations and alien worlds, where the Curios Space Control Station becomes ground zero as an unknown virus infects most, if not all, humans, trapping SAS forces to defend military space shuttle Mantis 12 when malfunctioning ramps prevent their escape. Here's the wild part. Humanity has been locked in the zombie war since the early 32nd millennium, when zombie outbreaks started occurring across multiple planets, turning what should be mankind's greatest era of technological advancement into a desperate struggle against an interstellar undead plague. The game's top-down shooter mechanics, combined with RPG elements, creates a genuinely addictive experience where players must strategically upgrade weapons and armor while facing hordes of space zombies that represents horror from humanity's past, unleashed on distant worlds. SAS-4 proves that even 1,000 years in the future, when humanity has conquered the stars, the Walking Dead will find new ways to drag civilization back into darkness. And honestly, that's both terrifying and kind of impressive. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies absolutely serves up Jane Austen's classic romance with a side of zombie apocalypse by inserting a plague into Regency-era England, where the Bennett sisters are trained in deadly martial arts alongside their education in proper etiquette, because apparently learning to curtsy and decapitate zombies goes hand in hand. The unmentionables, or dreadfuls, rise from their graves due to an unexpected plague, forcing England's upper class to adapt their social customs around zombie fighting protocols. And honestly, Victorian ladies with swords just hits different. Elizabeth Bennet becomes a sword-wielding warrior who can dispatch zombies with elegant brutality while maintaining her sharp wit and romantic tension with Mr. Darcy. Talk about multitasking. The story cleverly parallels social prejudices with literal fears of the undead, as characters must navigate both drawing room politics and zombie battlefields like some kind of twisted social media algorithm. Training in the deadly arts becomes as essential as learning French or piano for young ladies of sophistication, creating absolutely unhinged juxtapositions between mannered society and visceral combat. The film balances period romance conventions with zombie action, though it often struggles to merge these desperate elements into a cohesive tone. But let's be real, the concept alone is iconic enough to forgive the chaos. The Warhammer 40,000 universe absolutely goes hard with multiple zombie-creating plagues, most notably the zombie plague and various chaos-spawned infections that serve the dark gods of the warp, because apparently regular space warfare wasn't dystopian enough. Nurgle, the chaos god of decay and disease, creates zombies through his supernatural plagues that not only reanimate the dead, but often grant them grotesque resilience and the ability to spread infection through mere proximity, turning entire battlefields into walking biological hazards. The dreaded zombie plague can affect entire planetary populations, creating shambling hordes that retain enough intelligence to use basic weapons while being driven by an insatiable hunger for living flesh. Imagine zombies with guns and proximity. That's kind of OP. These chaos zombies are genuinely terrifying because they're sustained by warp energy rather than biological processes, making them nearly impossible to permanently destroy without psychic intervention or blessed weapons. Tyrannid bioweapons also create zombie-like creatures through parasitic organisms that reanimate corpses as expendable shock troops for the Hive Fleet's planetary consumption. Because why have one apocalyptic threat when you can have several? The Imperium's response to zombie outbreaks typically involves exterminatist protocols, orbital bombardment that destroys entire worlds rather than risk the infection spreading to other systems. And honestly, that's peak nuke it from orbit energy. Imperial god forces facing zombie hordes must balance fighting the undead threat while watching for signs of chaos corruption among their own ranks, as prolonged exposure to warp-tainted zombies can drive soldiers insane. The galaxy's constant warfare ensures abundant corpses for reanimation, making zombie outbreaks a persistent threat across countless war-torn worlds where the barriers between life and death have grown dangerously thin. Dead Space plunges players into the claustrophobic corridors of the USG Ishimura, a massive mining vessel where the unearthing of an ancient alien artifact called the Red Marker has unleashed a catastrophic necromorph outbreak that began on the planet of Aegis 7. These reanimated corpses are created through a unified infection derived from a genetic code etched into and transmitted by the markers, making them fundamentally different from traditional zombies, as they're the result of alien manipulation designed to trick dominant species into creating copies under the guise of limitless energy. The outbreak escalated when the activation of Marker 3A on Aegis 7 created a massive hive mind that acted as a nexus between the marker and the rest of the necromorphs, establishing a telepathic network that coordinates the alien swarm with terrifying intelligence. Engineer Isaac Clarke becomes trapped aboard the ship while searching for his girlfriend, armed only with mining tools that he must repurpose as weapons against increasingly horrific mutations that retain disturbing human characteristics while being twisted into impossible anatomical configurations. The game's strategic dismemberment system forces players to carefully target specific body parts, making each encounter a tactical puzzle rather than simple shooting. Religious fanaticism surrounding the marker adds another layer of horror as surviving crew members have been driven insane by its psychic influence, blurring the lines between salvation and damnation in humanity's darkest hour. ZombiU's zombie apocalypse hits London through something called the Last Blight, a deadly plague that covers the city in thick fog and represents the second time in history such horror has destroyed the area. The outbreak begins in November 2012 as part of an ancient prediction called the Black Prophecy, mixing supernatural mystery with biological terror in ways that make the infection feel cursed rather than just scientific. London's zombies keep weird habits from when they were human, like getting distracted by music at parties, showing they still react with familiar sounds even when hunting for fresh meat. The lore goes deeper by tying the outbreak to real historical events, suggesting that London is doomed to repeat its darkest chapters because of ancient secrets and forgotten warnings. Unlike typical zombie stories, ZombiU's infection feels like a punishment sent by fate, blending old legend with modern fears of unstoppable disease. The infection spreads so quickly that police and military forces completely lose control, with massive death and new infections proving that even well-prepared governments can't stop a virus meant to fulfill old prophecy. Survivors must sneak through fog-covered streets where famous London landmarks like Buckingham Palace and Tower Bridge become deadly zombie hunting grounds filled with infected former citizens, making the city itself feel haunted by its own history. Black Summer is a Netflix original and a spin-off prequel to Z Nation, but it ditches the comedy and wild antics for a raw, terrifying look at the earliest days of a zombie apocalypse. The virus at the center of the outbreak, known as ZN1 or the Red Death, was originally engineered as a bioweapon, and its effects are absolutely brutal. Victims turn into zombies within seconds to minutes after being bitten, scratched, or even just dying from unrelated causes. This rapid transformation leaves zero time for goodbyes or rescue, and the undead are fast, relentless, and require serious head trauma to be stopped. Unlike many other zombie shows, most survivors in Black Summer have no idea how to kill zombies at first, making every encounter chaotic and deadly. The show is infamous for showing how quickly society falls apart. The military tries to evacuate civilians, but confusion, panic, and a total lack of preparation lead to disaster. The government and authorities are overwhelmed almost immediately, unable to contain the virus as it mutates from bloodborne to airborne, making everyone a potential carrier. With no safe zones and no real plan, people are just cooked and left to fend for themselves. Over time, the zombie bodies decompose, but they remain dangerous for years. Black Summer stands out for its intense, realistic portrayal of societal collapse, where the real horror isn't just the zombies, but how quickly humans can turn on each other when everything falls apart. The Night Eats the World isolates its protagonist Sam in a Parisian apartment building after a zombie outbreak transforms the city overnight, trapping him in a world where the infected hunt relentlessly by sound but mysteriously become dormant during daylight hours, establishing a unique day-night survival cycle. Sam's methodical fortification of his building becomes both his salvation and his psychological prison, as months of complete isolation slowly unravel his sanity through desperate conversations with a zombie he keeps trapped in an elevator. The film transforms typical zombie horror into an intimate character study of solitude's devastating effects, showing how survival itself can become a form of torment when human connection is stripped away. His discovery of another survivor introduces fleeting hope, but also the crushing reminder of everything he's lost during his extended exile from humanity. The zombies themselves are portrayed as primal, animalistic creatures, driven purely by instinct, creating a world where the living mind itself poses as much of a threat to survival as the undead flesh. This French horror masterpiece proves that the most terrifying monster isn't the one trying to eat you. It's the one staring back from the mirror after months of talking to yourself.